everyone. Happy Easter and welcome to the Ashley Ridge Easter Together online experience. My name is Jen and we are simply minutes away from the start of our celebration. We all know that this year's Easter doesn't look like what any of us had planned, and it's going to be one that we remember for a long time to come. But the story of Easter, the reason we have to celebrate, has absolutely not changed. So we couldn't be more thrilled to be gathered here together with you and with your family. I want to let you know that in this time, we are continuing to make a huge impact as a church as we continue to show up and support our friends and our neighbors in this immediate community. I also want to remind you that Hearts for Summerville is continuing their work to get groceries to the families that need it most. And so if you can drop off groceries at 1411 Bacons Bridge Road, those are delivered same day and they're so very appreciated. I also want to continue inviting you to partner with us as we serve this community. Giving to Ashley Ridge looks different in this time, but you can give online via the app or via text. There is so much happening that we want to be part of with you. The last thing I want to tell you about is that this morning we're going to experience Easter together, but on Wednesday night we have an entire Easter experience that is geared toward your kids and your family celebrating together. It's going to be an incredible online Easter jam Wednesday at 6 p.m. So I want to encourage you to share the link with your friends, invite everyone you know, and meet back up with us on Wednesday at 6 for the Easter Kids Jam. Goodness, I wish we could be together this morning. I wish we could sing and I could hear your voices up close and personal as we remember this core center piece of our faith, which is that our God came from heaven to rescue us. Jesus went to a cross and he rose to life. But friends, I believe that God is bigger than our location. And so today we are together. Today we have every reason in the world to celebrate and be grateful. Our God is alive. Jesus is risen indeed.
Hey, we're glad you're here today. You may have some questions about Easter. You're not alone.
Experts are here. They have lots of opinions, so good luck with that.
All right, come on in. Why are we laughing? How are y'all? Good. You know what we're talking about today?
Easter!
Easter, that's right. So what do we celebrate on Easter?
Parties.
Parties. Yes, it's a big party. Ben, tell me why we have such a big party on Easter.
Because it's Jesus' birthday.
Is it?
Yes.
Can y'all draw me a picture of the Easter story?
This is Jesus.
This is Jesus. Leo, that is awesome. Has less hair than I would have imagined, but oh, that's great. What?
It's Jesus at the stable.
Jesus is at Staples, picking up some office supplies. Iris, when you think of Jesus, what animal comes to mind?
Wolf. A donkey. A horse.
Oh, a horse.
I have horses. Giraffe, probably.
A giraffe. Have you ever thought about Jesus being a lamb?
Yes.
Yes. What happened after he died on the cross?
He got in the tomb.
Ben, what happened when Jesus went in the tomb?
He moved the stone.
And he came out of the tomb. Gracie, what do you think Jesus would have said when he came out of the tomb?
Thank you so much for getting me out of the tomb.
If you had a friend who didn't know anything about Jesus, what's the first thing you would tell them?
I want to be kind to you.
I want to be kind to you?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what a wonderful thing to say. And then she's out. She's done. Morgan, tell me about the Easter story.
The bunny brings a Easter basket to everyone.
But somebody else brought something to everyone. Who was that?
About babies. About Santa.
I have failed as a parent. Whose shoe is this? Why? Put your shoe on. Your feet stink. Well, this went really well. No matter what it took for you to get here today, glad you're here. Happy Easter.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to Easter. Let's sing together this morning. I was buried beneath my shame. I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was much till I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave. Into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Your freedom is all that I know. The old made new, yeah. Jesus, when I met you, when you called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. I needed rescue, let's sing. I needed rescue. My sin was heavy, the chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan. Now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes were open, 'cause when you called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Well, welcome into church this morning. We're so glad you're here. Happy Easter. He's risen. Here's Pastor Jen.
Jesus knew that we needed a reason to believe. He knew that we needed evidence that we could put our feet firmly in, a reason to trust that he was exactly who he said that he was. But it occurs to me standing here at Easter with the world completely changed, that God also knew we were stuck. He knew that we were in places with our lives where we kept feeling like there was a better way, but we didn't know how to get there on our own. He knew that we were hesitant to believe in this Son that he had sent, but he also knew that we needed something. We needed someone. For weeks now, we've been asking that question of what would it take for you to believe? What evidence would you need to see to believe that Jesus is who he said he is, that God is actually for you? And I wonder if you've been asking that question in these days. I wonder if you've been asking yourself, what's it going to take in this coronavirus mess for me to believe that God's hearing our prayers, that God's answering our prayers, that God sees our day-to-day realities and the struggles that have come to define so much of our lives? What is it going to take? I think it's so helpful that we've landed on Easter right in the middle of all of this, Because Easter somehow helps us make sense of what feels like it makes so little sense right now. Because at Easter, we do meet up with some other people who'd been walking with Jesus for a while, who were having to answer that question of what would it take. They had seen him heal people. They had seen 5,000 people fed from loaves and fishes. And y'all, we have seen people fed, families fed from groceries dropped at the side of the door. And they were still asking the question, what was it going to take to believe that there was hope? That their hope that they had placed in this man they were following had not been hope placed in vain. And so here we are on Easter morning. The cross has happened. Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, they took the body and they laid him in the tomb. And for so many of Jesus' followers, hope felt gone. The very question they had been asking of what would it take to believe felt like the answer had been, you're not going to find it here. And so instead of standing outside of the tomb with signs and banners yelling, Jesus, Jesus, waiting for him to emerge, instead they were grieving and they were hiding and they were doubting. And isn't that the story of Easter? You've heard the story. Here we are. It's so worth telling, but it's early on the first day of the week. Here comes Mary, one of the immediate bystanders to Jesus' ministry, one of Jesus' closest friends. She was grieving. She showed up to see if she could care for the body that they had to let go over the Passover celebration, but now she showed up to see if she could finish the work. She wasn't sure she trusted what Joseph and Nick had done that night. Did they use enough aloe? Did they use enough myrrh? And so she arrived grieving, looking for something to do with all of that grief. But there wasn't any part of her that believed that she might see the resurrection that Jesus had spoken of only days before when he called Lazarus up out of the grave. And so there was Mary. And then, against all odds, she runs into a man she thinks is the gardener until he calls her by name, until he says her name, because what Jesus did in that moment of stuckness, it was so personal. And so there's Mary who falls at his feet, saying, "Teacher, it's you." Well, then, still utterly confused by the scenario, she runs off and she finds Peter and John, and they immediately run to the tomb. And I love this. We've been talking about these eyewitness accounts and why can we believe that they're true. And John, he's telling us this story. And let me tell you, if he just wanted to make up a story, he'd have made himself look a whole lot better, because he gets to the tomb first. So he tells us he's faster than Peter. But then when he gets there, he stops because he's scared. And so Peter arrives and goes into the tomb and comes out and says, Mary wasn't wrong. The stone was rolled away and the tomb was empty and the strips of linen were left laying there. But he and John, they were still confused, and so they went back to hiding. What was it going to take for them to believe? Then Jesus walked into a locked room where the disciples were hiding. And he said, "Peace be with you." Now, I'm not sure if they felt peace in that moment. I'm not sure if God actually answered all of our prayers right now, we would feel peace, or if we would feel absolute confusion. But Jesus walked in and said, "Here I am." And what's really cool is that Jesus not only predicted his life, he predicted that moment too. You remember? He said, unless you people see, you're never going to believe. But you might remember from the story, there was one more bystander who was missing that day, and it was Thomas. And so even after all of that, the disciples came to Thomas and they said, "We've seen him. We've seen the risen Lord." And Thomas said, "Unless I see him, unless I put my hands, touch his side, I just can't believe it." And if you remember from this part of John's story, he says, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my fingers where the nails were and put my hands into his side, I will not believe." Some of you are having those moments, and unless I see Fix It Jesus show up and Fix It Jesus, I won't believe. Unless I see a miracle, I won't believe. Well, a week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them this time. Still hiding, still uncertain. And though the doors were locked, Jesus came and he stood among them. And again he said, "Peace be with you." And then he said to Thomas, and I love this. This is such a sign of grace. This was such a sign of hope. This is such a sense of the Father's heart saying, I want to give you what you need. He looks at Thomas and he says, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side." That's kind of gross, but God was going all the way in. Whatever it's going to take for you, I'm here. I want to show you. I want you to believe. Put your hand in my side. Stop doubting and believe. And Thomas said to him in that moment, "My Lord and my God." And so here we are in this moment, and I've been encouraging all of us to ask and seek and knock, to pray prayers and have an expectation that God does want to show you. He does want to show you that He's real. He wants to show you that He sees your life and He sees your world and He sees your concerns, that He stopped at nothing, not just for a bunch of people a long time ago, but He stopped at nothing for you. And so we've been encouraging, ask, seek, knock, pursue it. But standing here on Easter morning, I don't want us to miss what God has already done. You see, our faith isn't grounded on the fantasies, on the whims of the made-up stories. It's grounded on real people who were determined to not believe, who were stuck and unable to see a way out. And in the middle of all of that, Jesus came. He came for you, and He came for me, and we can't miss what God has already done in the resurrection to say, "Here is my Son whom I loved, His life for your life, your hope, firmly grounded in the nail-scarred feet of Jesus, firmly placed and never in vain." Our God has done great things. That's why it's Easter, and it looks different. But we're going to sing, and we're going to celebrate, for He is risen indeed.
Come, let us worship the King. Come, let us bow at His feet. He has done great things. See what the Savior has done. See how His love overcomes. He has done great things. He has done great things. Well, hey, Ashley Ridge, sorry to break in like this, but as you know, oftentimes on Easter and at other times throughout the year, we like to do something special. And just because we couldn't be together in person this Easter doesn't mean that we still can't try to do something special that honors God. So I wanted to invite you for our last song to sing along with us. This is one you're definitely going to know, and I didn't want to do it by myself. So I've invited some of my friends who I have missed in these past few weeks. So, you guys ready? Okay, here we go. Alone in my sorrow and dead in my sin, lost without hope and no place to begin. Your love made a way to let mercy come in. When death was arrested and my life began, and ash was redeemed, only beauty remains. And my orphan heart was given a name. My mourning grew quiet, my feet rose to dance. When death was arrested and my life began. I know your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made me new, now life begins with you. Released from my chains, I'm a prisoner no more. My shame was a ransom you faithfully bore. He canceled my debt, he called me his friend. When death was arrested and my life began. Know your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new, now life begins with you. Oh, our Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. Darkness rejoiced as though heaven had lost. But then Jesus arose from our freedom in hell. That's when death was arrested and my life began. Know your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new, now life begins with you. stay tuned because here is Pastor Jen with a special Easter message. It's Easter together, y'all. We're so glad you're here. Hang tight.
Well, friends, the world as we know it has changed. Undeniably, indisputably, things have changed, and we've been hearing it talked about the last few weeks now of, is this the most the world has changed since World War II, the most that it's changed since 9/11? What we know, and it's really kind of hard to grasp and to get our minds around, but what we know is that we are currently living in the middle of chapters that will eventually be books written about this moment in history. And I wonder, and maybe it's too soon to even be asking the question, but as I stand around and I even look at a place like this that seemingly hasn't changed, I wonder if we ought to already be asking the question, how will we be different? What has changed in a way that is going to change how we live? I mean, will we simply wash our hands better than we did before? Or will we value our time with each other in ways that are wholly different from what we have in the past? And the reason I bring all of this up on Easter morning is because it was just at this point in the story that people were starting to ask this question. They had seen this evidence. They had seen Jesus come. It changed everything. They'd never seen a dead guy come back to life before. There was Lazarus, but Lazarus didn't predict it. This was still so wholly different. Here was one who walked through locked doors, who came back from the dead, who called himself the Son of the living God. They knew that their lives had been changed. They knew that the world had been changed. What remained to be seen is, would it make them different? And if it was going to make them different, how was it going to make them different? And so the earliest eyewitnesses were asking that very question. And interestingly, Paul, who we haven't really talked about because he wasn't one who got to spend a lot of up close and personal time with Jesus. In fact, he considered himself the last person to really see Jesus directly, even though it was on the other side of the resurrection and in weird circumstances on the road to Damascus. But Paul comes alongside some of these eyewitnesses and these earliest Christians and these families and these people who were trying to follow Jesus and live their lives differently in light of what they'd seen. And he comes alongside of them and he starts to help them answer these questions of, how will it be different? How will you and I be different because of it? And so I want to share this from 1 Corinthians. This was the letter that he was writing to the church in Corinth, and this was years after the resurrection, and they're puzzling through all these pieces. And I'm in 1 Corinthians 15, chapter 3. And Paul says, "For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures." And again, he's saying, just like he said, right? Just like was predicted, just like the prophets told us, in exactly the way that we were told, Jesus Christ came and he died for our sins. He was buried and he was raised on the third day, again, according to the scriptures. He said it was going to happen. God told us it was going to happen. We couldn't see it in the moment, but just as he said it, it was. And then he appeared to Peter, and then to the 12. And after that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. And then he appeared to James, and then to all the apostles. And last of all, he appeared to me also as to one abnormally born. Now we're back to the confusing conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus about how you had to be born. Paul said, my path was different from theirs. I wasn't fishing and stopped. I was actually beating up people who were following Jesus, and I got pulled out of it. But he goes through this long list of eyewitnesses. He said first it was Peter, then it was the 12, 12, and then Thomas, he got pulled in as part of the 12, and then there were 500 other people who saw Jesus before he ascended into heaven, people he talked to, people who got to touch his hands and see his sides. There were all of these witnesses to this thing that happened. And he said, "For I am the least of the apostles and do not even deserve to be called an apostle because, like we just talked about, I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God," don't miss this, "I am what I am. And his grace to me was not without effect." You see, no matter how you came to this story and how much you've seen of it and how much you still have yet to see, how much of it you understand, how much of it you've puzzled through, how well you know how to pray, how much of the Bible makes sense to you. Paul says, wherever you showed up in this narrative, the grace of God at work in making you part of this story has had an effect. This grace, this overwhelming story of God's rescue of you and me, it can't help but change everything. It changes all of who we are. It changes how we understand the world, and it is grace, right? Remember last week I talked about how sometimes when things change, it can be disorienting and then clarifying. But friends, on this side of the resurrection, it is but grace. That God would change the world he made, and we messed up because he's desperately in love with you and with me. And so Paul says this grace, it has an effect. But then if you jump forward in this conversation, he has a whole long conversation in this letter to the Corinthians about what resurrection would mean. But if I jump forward to verse 51, he says this. He says, "Listen, I'm going to tell you a mystery. I'm going to tell you something that it's not going to all make sense right now, but lean in close. Listen, we will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality. What has been isn't anymore. The rules, the limits, the falling off points, the cliffs, what was is no longer. What was unforgivable is now forgivable. What was unredeemable is now redeemable. What was such a hot mess that you thought your life was over, Jesus said, let me show you how I bring dead things back to life. We will be changed. And when the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that is written will come true. Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? For the sting of death is sin, but the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, for he gives us the victory in our Lord Jesus Christ. And I love how Eugene Peterson translated that verse in the Message. He interrupts all of it and he's like, yep, the law, sin, we were all so screwed up, but in one single victorious stroke of life, all three, sin, guilt, and death, have no more power. They are gone. Thanks be to God in Jesus. And then here's what he wants you to hear. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm in the faith that you've found, in the evidence of what you've seen, in the God that you now know stops at nothing for you. Stand firm. Put your feet there and do not move. Plant your feet firmly on the foundation that is Jesus. He's what won't disappoint you. He's what will never let you down. He's the one that takes all of the other stuff and gives us new life. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord. It's happening in you and it's happening in me because your labor in the Lord is never in vain. Here's what I want to tell you in this moment. It's been a crazy few weeks and we needed Easter morning. We needed Easter morning to remind us that God uses all of it. That there isn't a single piece of the history and the story that's been written that God doesn't take and use and write over an entirely new story of a grace that's effect changes everything. And so for every one of you in the midst of your struggle today, and maybe your struggle, your biggest struggle right now has nothing to do with the immediate effects of this global health pandemic. Maybe your struggle is your relationship. Maybe your struggle is a child. Maybe your struggle, whatever your struggle might be. I want you to know that God uses it all. And he tells us to stand firm and put our hope in Jesus. Because what those first eyewitnesses saw, it wasn't just for them. And I love that Jesus actually told Thomas that right after Thomas said, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said, it's such a great thing that you got to see. But blessed are those who are going to hear about what you saw, who are going to stand on your faith, who are going to hear the stories that have been captured and shared and passed down for generations, and they too will believe. Because what God did once and for all, he changed the world forever, and he changed it for you and me. Friends, there's nothing that you have done that can't be and hasn't been forgiven. There is no piece of your life that is so broken that our God can't make you whole. It's the promise of Easter. And it's the promise that we stand firm in today, and we refuse to be moved no matter how scary the world starts to look, that this isn't simply a promise that was good for a few. It's a promise that was good for the many. It's the promise we hold on to every night for our families and for our children and for their children and for their children. That our God is for us. And if you need a reason to believe it, well, happy Easter, friends, because Jesus was dead with sin and darkness, and now he is alive forevermore.
Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. Lord, turn his face toward you and give you peace. And Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you. Lord, turn his face toward you and give you peace. And his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children. children, your children. May his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May his presence go before you, and behind you, and beside you, all around you, and within you. He is with you, he is with you in the morning, in the evening, and you're coming, and you're going, and you're weeping, rejoicing. He is for you, he is for you, he is for you. And amen, and amen. May his presence go before you, and behind you, and beside you, all around you, and within you. He is with you, he is with you in the morning, in the evening, and you're coming, and you're going, and you're weeping and rejoicing. He is for you, he is for you. And amen, and amen, amen, and amen, amen, and amen, amen. Happy Easter. Blessings on you and your family. We'll see you real soon. Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you. Be gracious